Agentic AI is when your AI stops being just a chatbot and starts acting like an intelligent assistant. It doesn't just respond, it thinks, decides, and executes. So, agentic is equal to agent plus autonomy. It means your AI can make decisions on what to do next, call external tools like APIs, databases, react to the world or new inputs, and handle multiple step workflows. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Now, at its core, agentic AI goes beyond streamlining a single process. It can radically reorganize how entire value chains operate. By blending LLMs, large language models, with specialized intelligent agent modules, these platforms orchestrate tasks, retrieve information, and continually adapt to new contexts. Let's welcome Vikas Garg, CPO and co founder of Kapture CX, to explore the evolution of artificial AI from passive assistive systems to agentic AI that can independently understand context, make decisions, and take actions across enterprise workflows. Hi Vikas, how are you doing?
Hi, Priya. Thank you for inviting me. I'm doing well. Really excited to be here, and yeah, would love to talk more about the things that we are.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you on a podcast today, Vikas. And of course, everywhere, from CTOs to even data analysts, everybody is talking about agentic AI. So let's talk more about it. And before we, understand more from sharing your insights, we would like to know more about Capture CX. So, our listeners would also like to know about the company, and we would also like to know more about you and your role towards the company.
Sure, absolutely. So we are Capture CX. We help enterprises to transform their customer support with the help of agentic AI, right? So fundamentally, customer service, customer support is broken. Like whenever you have, had a last customer service conversation, you would be feeling frustrated at the end of it, or, nobody's looking forward to calling their, bank or a airline or retail bank, right? Because those conversations are really not something anybody enjoys. While on the business side, enterprises side, they are spending a lot of money on it. They have, large teams of thousands of people, a lot of product technology that has been built over the last decade or so to solve customer service, but still it continues to be a very unhappy place. Right. So we are here to change that. We are using agentic AI and the platform that we've created underneath it. We strive to make customer service a happier place where the customers, the real, essence why they are reaching out can be understood better. It is, getting resolved. The responses of the platform has to be very hyper personalized, right? So you want that the person who is on the other side or the agent who is on the other side understands what your problems are specific, and not treat everybody as the same workflow or the same SOP, right? So that's what we do. We make the customer service very hyper personalized. It's able to understand the real customer, what products they have bought, what problems they might be facing, and whether they are a high value customer or what, how do you best resolve that, and also make it very instant. The agent are able to do a lot of different things at the same time, access information from different platforms, and directly able to resolve it. We strive to make sure that it's very instant. There should not be anything like I will get back to you on it, I will, which is a very common term that you will hear in a customer service. So I know that's what we are here to solve. So I'm the CPO at Capture, so I take care of the entire product roadmap, how the product and the tech side of things, in terms of how things will be made, what are the things that are, how enterprises will use agentic AI to solve their large problems. We work in retail and BFSI as our two main verticals. So working with customers in both retail and BFSI, these are large organizations, to understand what is that problems that they face on ground, what could be automated, what could be solved better. So that's what my role primarily revolves around.
That's incredibly great, Vikas, and thank you for sharing that overview about the company and also about your role. I think the scale of vision combined with the clarity of execution you described truly sets the tone for the kind of impact you're driving in the customer service segment. Moving ahead with that foundation set in place, Vikas, let's dive deeper into our conversation. We are entering what feels like a genuinely different phase of AI capability, the emergence
Right.
of reliable vertical agents that can handle specific complex workflows end to end. The goal isn't necessarily to solve automated research, though that would be nice, but to build something concrete where we can systematically evaluate different approaches to prompt engineering, model selection, and error correction. Now, sometimes the best way to understand emerging capabilities is to push them against real problems you actually care about solving. And I think over the past 2 years, we have moved from AI generating outputs to now AI executing the workflows. From your perspective, what truly defines the agentic moment we are entering now?
No, no, absolutely, spot on, right? So the base of the generative AI, which is LLMs, they are, output generators or question answering engines, right? So they know how to give a best response to a question, based on some instructions that we will give to it, right? But to find real use case, it is not just about being able to search information better, right? So the real use case is if we have to allow people, allow agents or the AI to be able to make some decisions. It should be able to decide what to do in a certain scenario, or the entire system, right? So that's where agentic AI comes in the picture. So agentic AI is able to, ask the right questions to LLMs, take those responses, and look at the data at the same time, look at how the human in the loop is feeling, whether it's the customer, whether it's the internal employee, and based on that, it is able to solve a real life problem, whether it is about like a lead qualification, that you would understand whether a lead is good enough for an enterprise to pursue, right? Let's say out of hundreds of people who are applying for loan, which are the right people that would be able to take it to next stage, right? The training your employees, whether it's your customer service teams, you are helping your customers to resolve their problems, answer their queries, fulfill their requests, whether it's monotonous processes like vendor onboarding, collections, reminding people to pay on time, or if they have missed their EMIs, calling them again, reminding them to pay and things like that, right? So these are places where these are already getting disrupted, already getting automated, and the scope of agentic AI is obviously much more larger. The vision is that it can replace a lot of these monotonous automated, and automate a lot of these processes. The biggest advantage of agentic is that it can hyper personalize, right? So hyper personalization is a very, very important because every customer is different, every person is different, and when you have a repeated process, you run those on SOPs and you run those on very same script for every customer kind of process. Whereas hyper personalization is allows you to let the AI decide how to best handle a particular customer, whether it's about some customer, who doesn't have a certain documentation, but they have other ones. How do you take them through the journey? The training, learning curves are very different for different people. Somebody already know half the things and you want to directly start them from the, 51% of the, thing. And the other one wants to start from zero and you can, start from there, right? So this hyper personalization in all these processes what agentic AI is able to ensure. And agentic AI is the way that things get really used in real life scenarios. That's what we do things here.
Absolutely, that's pretty wonderful, Vikas. And I'm really glad to understand, how these AI systems are now becoming more acting like a platform that can reason, plan, and take action with minimal human intervention. And I think this current agentic moment also seems to redefine how businesses should think about productivity itself. I think instead of humans orchestrating every micro task, we are beginning to see AI agents coordinating so much around processes and tools, and they're almost functioning like digital teammates rather than just mere software features. Great. So when we're talking about agentic AI, initially when it was launched, or when it made its appearance, I think a lot of CIOs thought, isn't just stuff just for Silicon Valley, and they would always have skepticisms around AI agents. The truth is that employees are already using AI tools in their personal tech stacks with or without IT approval. Now, a study by MIT shows that workers from 90% of company surveys use personal chatbot accounts like ChatGPT and other LLMs for their daily work routine. I think far from being the stuff of Silicon Valley, agentic AI has definitely seeped into company workflows. And the imperative for businesses now is to figure out how to implement and deploy AI agents in secure ways to improve overall business operations. So, what, according to you, are certain misconceptions that CPOs usually have about agentic AI? And how do you think that these misconceptions can slow down adoption?
Sure. That's a great point, right? Like, while one number is that everybody is already using, or, majority of the workforce is already using, AI, but still at an enterprise scale, still like the AI is still in a very nascent stage, right? The, adoption of AI at enterprise workflow levels are, still pretty low as compared to what the potential is, right? So I think there are, two, three things that are currently happening. I think it's a learning curve. People are, getting used to the new way things are being done, right? It's a disruptive technology, right? The fundamental, way like earlier automation was being imagined and being done by people was that I will have somebody to write a good logic layer in terms of, what do you do in step one and what do you do in step two and what do you do in step three, and then you automate that through a RPA kind of a platform, right? That was the typical thinking process in a, automation process for any company, right? That's what teams were inclined to do. But now with generative AI, the way things are being imagined is very different. And that's one of the learning curve that CIOs and CPOs are right now going through in terms of, how to think about generative AI, what kind of autonomy that you want to give to agents. That's a very important decision, right? You don't want to allow them to decide everything on their own, because then you can't control the way your customer experiences or the way the business decisions are being taken. But you also don't want it to be very restrictive where somebody is just defining ABC and everything, and the agents, the agentic AI is not really using any intelligence on its own and it's just following your instructions, right? So that's one thing that is getting solved by, bringing in thought leadership or, implementation partners who really understand how to really configure these agents, how to really write these prompts, right? So that's one area that's a lot of work is happening on that side, right? Another, obviously, implementation is like I said, is a big part of it, right? So selecting the right implementation partners becomes very important for this. And generally, like people do start taking sides very fast in terms of these are the workplaces, these are the teams that will not get disrupted, or this work can never be done because right now agentic AI cannot create good PPT. So, I will always need this is always going to be a manual work and I should not focus on this, or, things, those kind of things. I think generally the idea is because the technology is evolving every week, every days, every week, every month, we see new upgrades coming in, new capabilities being built in. So having a very open mind definitely helps in terms of keep experimenting, keep doing it and finding out those implementation layers where things can already start making impact. I think over the last 6 months, even in our overall implementations, we have started seeing the adoption rate has increased a lot more on the last 6 months to 12 months. And now we are seeing a lot of scale around how people are using agentic AI. I think in the next 12 to 24 months, enterprises will really start getting disrupted by agentic AI use cases, what we believe in.
Definitely, Vikas. And I think, because right now agentic AI is surrounded with both excitement and hesitation. And I believe CPOs are still evaluating AI through the lens of traditional automation. I mean, expecting predictable and rule-based outcomes. However, agentic systems are, fundamentally different. They are designed specifically to reason, adapt, and operate with a level of autonomy. And that definitely requires new governance models and a shift in how trust is built within the product teams. Lovely. So, just like I mentioned, you have certain hesitation as well, and we need to evolve how tech space is evolving today. And when we talk about AI, I think it's entering in every public domain, whether it's transportation, healthcare, public safety, security, entertainment. So the list is endless. Developments in autonomy and learning technologies are rapidly enabling AI systems to decide and act without direct human control. But as these advances continue at high speed, there is also growing awareness that a responsible approach to AI is needed to ensure the safe, beneficial, and fair use of AI technologies, and to consider the implications of morally relevant decisions making by machines, as well as the ethical and legal consequences with the status of AI. So, what does responsible autonomy look like in practice?
Thank you. I think that's a very important point, right? Like when we are, leaving this decision making to a machine, right? Let's say I just tell a machine to identify customers which are going to give me more revenue, right? Or let's say, if I'm selling insurance or I'm selling loans, identify people which are going to give me, which is going to be more profitable. I give it a very, very top level goal. Then the chances of it being, not fair, it being more bias towards a certain persona of people, or bias toward a certain profession, toward a certain race, sex, that becomes, those risks becomes high, right? Like that's some of the fundamental things, that even initially when Gemini was launched, it was biased to, in a certain way. ChatGPT was biased in a certain way, and then so that's a responsibility that lies on all enterprises, on on players like us who are implementing these things, to how do we make AI fair? How do we make it unbiased? And what is that autonomy that we should give it, right? So a lot of emphasis has to be given around what kind of decision making that you want AI to do. It should be more in line of, which is not really taking the information of age, sex, gender, things like, which can make it biased, but more in terms of what products you like, what kind of service you like, what kind of how do you personalize responses based on the products, the service, the location, and give you a better experience in terms of where you are in a certain stage of a journey, and do that, right? So it's a very difficult thing to do, and allow people, ensure that everybody is able to have an unbiased thing. So the responsibility does lies in different players here. It's not just a implementation partner, but it also at the LLM companies or the model companies, to make sure their models are unbiased. Maybe the models which are trained by a certain country are going to be have a certain way of working versus a model trained by certain other countries, right? So these things are happening. These things are difficult to manage, but best way I will define responsible autonomy is that if we are able to make those implementation very unbiased, they should not worry about what the name, sex, gender, religion, what's the basis of that, and making that as a decision making layer, but more of, more generate, more able to provide better customer experience to everybody and make it more unbiased, but more hyper personalized. So that's where, we believe.
Well said, Vikas. And I think, ultimately trust becomes the currency here. Users or enterprises and even regulators need confidence that autonomous systems are reliable, fair, and safe to use. And especially, when
Mm.
these technologies start influencing critical sectors like healthcare or finance for that matter. And
Right.
I think, the real challenge shifts from can we automate to how do we govern automation responsibly. And I think it requires a lot of transparency in how decisions are made. We need to ensure that the governance is right, being embedded from the design stage itself, and where you also have certain mechanisms that if something doesn't go as planned, there is where humans can still intervene whenever necessary.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when we talk about AI with the all the advancements, I think AI is fundamentally altering the tech services landscape. And for decades, I think firms have had to reinvent to stay ahead of their clients. And in the long run, I think AI should lead to more service opportunities and not less. One quick question: do you expect AI native companies currently to outpace traditional enterprises once how cloud native firms have done that?
I think 100%. I think that's definitely, is going to happen because, and that's not just, I will not even subscribe to the view of, few people who are of the view that everything will get, automated and AI will take over the world, right? Like I am, still, or as Capture, we are very inclined on the AI plus human working together to do better, right? But the amount of productivity enhancement that AI is bringing to every person, I think that's gonna be fundamentally gonna change the metrics of your business, right? So if a same person is able to produce a lot more, I feel, a software programmer is able to write a lot more code, a product manager is able to plan five more things at the same time, run different projects at the same time, right? So even on the sales GTM side, the amount of work you can handle, what kind of things can be automated, right? So fundamentally it's a productivity booster, and at a multiple x level, it's like in certain roles it can even make it 10x productivity gains, right? So in those kind of things, companies which are AI native, which are able to implement AI from starting, their metrics will look a lot better, their costs will be low, their outputs will be higher, so they will outpace the traditional companies. The companies which are not able to move fast enough because they have legacy processes, legacy things, are will have to invest a lot more, a lot faster to be able to to turn around their companies to be AI native. That's definitely a place where we see a lot of work has to be done.
Great point, Vikas. And I think when, these AI native organizations, I think it's important that they are not simply adding AI as a future. They should focus on redesigning their entire operating model around data or automation and, continuous learning. That potentially gives them a speed and adaptability advantage, that traditional enterprises usually struggle to match due to the legacy outdated systems and organizational inertia and also some pre-established workflows. So since you
Right.
mentioned that that these are certain things that the cloud native organizations would be able to outpace traditional enterprises, what is something that you would want to share with leadership today to make sure that they are relevant in an AI driven future?
Right. So obviously, I think one is not to be, obviously, there's a lot of noise in the market, right? So everybody, every day you go on Twitter and they're like, okay, IT services will be over. And next day you're like, okay, cloud security companies will be over. And then next day you're like, this entire section will get disrupted, right? So there's a lot of noise, I think. And it's even including, for me or for anybody at I believe, a decision making level, it's a difficult time to identify what are those right projects, what are those right levers that you should pull to make sure that you are able to do a right, like a create a right path for your organization, right? So I think the biggest thing is right now to declutter the noise, getting those, identifying those two, three, four big areas where AI can make a difference in your organization, and then working on those projects, right? So I don't think anybody is ignoring it. I fundamentally believe that people should not be ignoring it right now, obviously. But even people who are not ignoring it now I can be stressed by the noise that's there. Like, okay, is there a point on working on it, or instead I identify what are those three, four, five projects that can really transform the journey of my company, and then identifying those and executing that, right? I think that's very important to stay on track. For everybody, whether it's a retail company or a banking, financial, like there's so much more they can do, in terms of how to reach out to customers, how to, do better customer experience overall, making sure your customers have a very customized, hyper personalized plan, give, to them. They are feeling, customer experience is a very important, thing, right? Like you want to make sure your customers are feeling happy with your brand. So, retaining your customers. So, identify those key three, four projects where AI will make a difference, and then work very fast to, implement that and repeating that and not getting disrupted, not getting, distracted by the noise in the industry.
That's a powerful perspective, Vikas, and I think that stands out is that this isn't just a technological shift, it's also leadership mindset shift. And leaders have to move from managing people executing tasks to orchestrating these systems where humans and agents co-create the outcomes. And that feels like dividing the line between companies that can experiment with AI and companies that are fundamentally transformed by it. Said that, I think we have had a lot of discussion around agentic AI. What are some things that leaders should do in terms of surviving in an AI driven era? But one last question for you, Vikas, is if AI can think, decide, and act, what should humans focus on mastering next?
No, no, I think that's the question in on everybody's mind, right? Like, is what is that humans needs to do next, right? So, what is that, and how the work is evolving? So, fundamentally, we know that with every technological shift that has happened, whether it's the industrial revolution or whether it's about the entire information age, or even much, much before in the human evolution, right? So, whenever a new technology comes in, it brings advantage to the people who use it. So, that's definitely one thing. So even when we say that AI is able to automate, is able to think, act, so one thing fundamentally the AI doesn't do is take a stand, right? Like today, if I want to build something, right, I can ask AI why I should build it. It will give me 10 ways that it can be built, and it will go ahead and build it. And it can, if I say that I should not build it and I should build it in a different way, AI will go ahead and build it in a different way, right? So it can do what it's told to do, but it cannot take a stand in terms of what is that right thing that you want to build in, right? So that's where humans comes in. We are the we are going to take those stands on every decision making, right? So like what is that right decision, what is the right product, what is the right way to do a certain thing, and that is going to identify, that is going to define winners and losers, right? And that those are the differences that we will bring in to the table. So orchestrating AI will continue to hallucinate to a certain level, because the fundamentals of LLMs are generators. So there is going to be some level of hallucination always built in. It can reduce, but they will be there. So humans, different roles, being able to identify hallucinations, being able to differentiate between what is right, what is wrong, ability to set directions, in terms of what we should do, whether this is the right way to do it or that is the right way to do it, right? So a lot of those decision making is still going to be with humans. And yeah, rest is, I don't think predicting future is anybody's game, but rest is for us to see over the next decade or so, next 4 5 years, seeing how humans have to evolve to adapt to AI along with that.
Definitely, Vikas. And I think agentic AI marks a transformative leap in artificial intelligence, moving well beyond generative AI. These autonomous software agents can make decisions, adapt, and execute complex tasks with minimal human input, and empowering AI task automation at scale. These systems are definitely reshaping so many sectors, you name it, and it has an impact. And but the true impact requires good robust governance, infrastructure, as well as a reskilling. So agentic AI is not just innovation, it is a redefinition of modern work and a critical step toward a more autonomous AI powered future. Thank you so much, Vikas, for taking out the time and effort to be on our podcast today and helping us understand that while the myths replacement costs can make it appear like science fiction, agentic AI is a modern and practical tool, and companies must deploy it responsibly and with purpose so it can amplify teams and accelerate operations responsibly. Thank you so much, Vikas, for your insights. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Priya, for having me. Yeah, lovely to chat with you.
Great. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around agentic AI and how does an AI powered future look like where most of the tasks are autonomous. Stay tuned for upcoming podcasts, and you can view and listen all our previous episodes on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.